A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You ever get that feeling of nostalgia for things that were objectively worse than what we have now? I was thinking about this morning, specifically the old days of cinema. You know, when a movie was a physical stack of heavy platters, and a projectionist had to actually be a skilled technician instead of just a guy who knows how to reboot a server. There was something romantic about the whir of the projector and the occasional cigarette burn in the corner of the frame.
It is a massive shift in every sense of the word, Corn. The physical weight of a movie has gone from 100 pounds of celluloid to essentially zero, yet the technical weight has exploded. I am Herman Poppleberry, and I actually spent way too much time this week looking into the logistics of this because it is far more complex than just hitting a download button. Today's prompt from Daniel is about exactly that, how cinemas actually receive movie files for legal exhibition in this post-film reel era, and what those digital masters actually look like on a technical level.
Daniel always has a way of finding the topics that sound simple until you realize there is a giant encrypted rabbit hole underneath. I mean, we all know it is digital now, but I think most people assume the manager just logs into a theater version of Netflix and hits play. But it is more like a high-stakes data heist in reverse, right? You have these multi-million-dollar assets flying through the air or traveling through fiber optics, and the security measures are intense.
That is a great way to put it. The industry standard is the Digital Cinema Package, or DCP. Think of it not as a single video file like an MP4 or a MOV file, but as a highly structured encrypted folder. It is basically a digital shipping container. Inside that container you have separate files for the video essence, the audio essence, and the metadata. It is all wrapped in what we call MXF files or material e-exchange format.
A shipping container. I like that. So instead of a bunch of physical reels, we are talking about a massive folder of data. How massive are we talking? Because I am guessing my home internet would probably give up the ghost if I tried to pull one of these down. I struggle with a 40 gigabyte game update, let alone a whole movie in theater quality.
The scale is impressive. For a standard feature-length movie in 2K resolution, you are looking at anywhere from 150 to 300 gigabytes. If you step up to 4K, which is becoming the standard for major releases, that jumps to between 400 and 600 gigabytes. And if you are looking at something like Avatar: The Way of Water, which was high frame rate in 3D, those files can exceed 630 gigabytes. To put that in perspective, that is about 60 times the size of a high-quality 4K stream you would get at home.
630 gigabytes for one movie. That is basically my entire hard drive from 5 years ago. And they are not just using standard H.264 compression, are they? Because that bitrate must be through the roof to fill up that much space. I mean, if you have that much data, the image must be practically pristine.
It is. The video is almost always encoded using JPEG 2000. This is a wavelet-based compression, which is fundamentally different from the discrete cosine transform compression you see in things like H.264 or even the newer H.265. Most streaming services use interframe compression, where the computer looks at one frame and then only records the changes in the next few frames. JPEG 2000 is intraframe, meaning every single frame of the movie is compressed as its own individual high-resolution still image. The beauty of JPEG 2000 is that it is mathematically much more robust. It avoids those blocky artifacts you see in dark scenes on streaming services. Standard DCPs have a maximum bitrate of 250 megabits per second, but the newer standards for high dynamic range and high frame rate allow for up to 500 megabits per second.
500 megabits per second. My word, Herman. Netflix 4K is what? 15 or 20 megabits per second on a good day? No wonder the theater still looks better. You are basically throwing 25 times the data at the screen every second. But even if you have this giant folder of data, you cannot just open it up and watch it, right? I assume the studios are a little protective of their multi-million-dollar assets. If I could just copy a DCP to a thumb drive, the internet would be flooded with perfect copies on opening night.
They are incredibly protective. This is where the KDM comes in, the Key Delivery Message. Even if a theater has the 600 gigabyte DCP sitting on their server, it is essentially a pile of digital bricks without the KDM. The KDM is a small encrypted XML file that contains the decryption key for that specific movie. But here is the kicker. That key is locked to the specific serial number of the media block inside the theater's projector. This is part of what they call the trust device list.
So I cannot just take the key from the theater down the street and use it on my projector. It is tied to the hardware itself? That is some serious DRM.
It is hardware locked. The KDM also has a very strict time window. It might be programmed to only work from Friday at 8 a.m. until the following Thursday at midnight. If the theater tries to run a show at 7:55 a.m., the projector simply will not play the file. It is a very rigid system designed to prevent piracy and unauthorized screenings. It even logs every time the file is played, creating an audit trail for the studios.
That sounds like a nightmare for the theater manager. Imagine the stress of waiting for a digital key to arrive while a line of people is waiting for popcorn. If that email does not show up, you have a room full of angry people and no movie. How do they actually get these files and keys? Is there still a guy in a truck, or is it all coming from space now?
It is a mix, but the guy in a truck is becoming a rarity. Currently, about 80 to 90% of major theater content in North America is delivered via satellite or high-speed fiber. There is a massive co-op called the Digital Cinema Distribution Coalition, or DCDC. It was founded by the big players, AMC, Regal, Cinemark Universal, and Warner Brothers. They manage a satellite multicasting network that beams these massive files to over 33,000 screens simultaneously.
Multicasting. So they just blast the signal out once, and every theater with a dish catches it and saves it to their local drive. That seems efficient, but what happens if there is a storm?
That is exactly the problem. Satellite is great for reaching everyone at once, but it is susceptible to weather and something called sun fades, which is when the sun aligns perfectly with the satellite and the Earth station, drowning out the signal with solar noise. Because of that, there is a major shift happening right now, specifically as of March 2026, toward what we call terrestrial IP, which is just a fancy way of saying high-speed fiber internet. Companies like Deluxe are using GoFlex technology to move away from satellites. Fiber is better because it is bidirectional. The theater can talk back to the distributor, confirm the file is intact, and even send back telemetry data.
I love the term sun fades. It sounds like something a surfer would complain about, not a technical hurdle for a movie theater. But what about the theaters in the middle of nowhere? Surely they're not all on fiber yet. Do they still get those rugged yellow cases? I remember seeing those in the back of the theater years ago.
The CRU drives? Yes, the ruggedized 3.5-inch hard drives and those iconic yellow flight cases are still around. They are mostly used for independent films, film festivals, or as emergency backups when a satellite download fails. But even those are a bit of a technical hurdle for the uninitiated. Those drives are almost always formatted in Linux ext2 or ext3 file systems. If you try to plug one into a standard Windows or Mac computer, it will usually tell you the drive is unreadable or needs to be formatted. It is another layer of keep out for the average person. You need specialized software or a Linux machine just to see the file structure.
It is like the industry has built a digital fortress around these files. But let's talk about the actual process of getting the movie from that delivery source to the screen. I think you mentioned ingestion earlier. That sounds like something a snake does after a large meal. Is the projector just eating the data?
In a way, it is. When the data arrives via satellite or fiber, it goes into a library server in the theater. This is a massive storage array that holds all the current movies, trailers, and advertisements. But the projector does not play the file directly from the library server. The file has to be ingested into the specific media block, or IMB, which stands for Image Media Block, inside the projector for each auditorium. This is essentially the brain of the projector. It decodes the JPEG 2000 wavelets in real time and handles the decryption using that KDM key we talked about. This ensures that the high byte rate data has a direct, secure path to the light engine without any network bottlenecks.
So it is a two-step move, from the sky to the library, and then from the library to the specific projector. It seems like a lot of moving parts. And I saw a report recently that theaters are starting to use AI to manage all of this. Is the projectionist finally going the way of the dodo? I mean, if the computer is doing the ingestion and the key management, what is left for the human to do?
The data from March 2026 is pretty startling. About 52% of cinema operators are now exploring AI for what they call automated booth operations. The AI handles the KDM scheduling, it monitors the health of the projector lamps or laser modules, and it automatically moves the right files to the right auditoriums based on the ticket sales software. If a show sells out in Theater 5 and they move it to the larger Theater 1, the AI sees that and starts the ingestion process to the new projector automatically. In many modern multiplexes, there is no one actually in the projection booth. It is just a dark room full of servers and humming fans.
That is a bit sterile, isn't it? I miss the idea of a guy with a cigarette and a loop checking the focus. But I guess if it means the movie actually starts on time and the focus is handled by a computer, the audience wins. Speaking of hardware shifts, I saw that Samsung and GDC are pushing these new LED screen standards. That seems like a massive departure from traditional projection. We are talking about getting rid of the projector entirely, right?
It is a fundamental change. At the industry showcases earlier this month, they highlighted the new DCI specifications for direct view LED screens like Samsung's Onyx. Instead of a projector at the back of the room beaming light onto a fabric screen, the screen itself is the light source. It is like a giant version of your television, but made of modular LED panels. This allows for true blacks because you can just turn the pixels off, and it provides incredible brightness. But it also changes how the DCP is handled. The media block has to be much more powerful to drive that many individual pixels directly without any loss in quality.
And I assume these LED screens are part of the premium large format push. I saw Cube Cinema is expanding their EPIQ brand across India and the Middle East. It feels like theaters are trying to create an experience you absolutely cannot get at home, even if you have a 100-inch TV. They are leaning into the proprietary nature of the tech.
Cube is a very interesting player in this space. They operate the CubeWire platform, which is a global marketplace for DCP delivery. They are trying to make it so an independent filmmaker in Ireland can upload their movie and, with a few clicks, have it delivered and licensed to theaters in Dubai or Mumbai. They are essentially trying to democratize the very rigid system we have been talking about, while also pushing their own high-end EPIQ format to compete with IMAX.
That is the part that fascinates me. We have this massive consolidated infrastructure, like the DC-DC acquiring Cinecert back in February. That is a huge move, right? The people who deliver the movies now own the people who manage the keys.
It is vertical integration at its finest. By owning Cinecert, the DC-DC now controls the industry standard for how those KDM keys are generated and managed. It streamlines the pipeline, but it also centralizes a lot of power. If you want to show a movie in a major theater in North America, you are almost certainly going through their ecosystem. It makes the whole process more efficient, but it also means there is a single point of failure or control.
It makes sense from a business perspective, but it does make me worry about the digital dark age we talked about back in episode 1177. If all of this is proprietary, and it is all locked behind these hardware-specific keys and Linux-formatted drives, what happens to these movies in 50 years? If I find a reel of 35mm film in an attic in the year 2100, I can still see the movie.
That is a legitimate concern. With 35mm film, you can always just shine a light through it. It is a human-readable format. A DCP is not. If the specific company that made the media block goes out of business, or if the encryption standards change and no one keeps the old keys, those 600 gigabyte files become completely useless. They are just random bits of noise. We are essentially trusting a handful of corporations to maintain the projectors of the future indefinitely. We are trading long-term stability for short-term quality and security.
It is a fragile kind of progress. We get 500 megabits of glorious JPEG G2000 wavelets, but we lose the ability to just look at the film and see what is on it. I suppose that is the trade-off. But for the average moviegoer, the result is pretty spectacular. I mean, the jump from 2K to 4K, especially on those new LED screens, is something else.
The visual quality is undeniable, and the audio side is just as impressive. We did a whole deep dive on high-fidelity media in episode 1545, but in the context of a DCP, you are getting uncompressed multi-channel PCM audio. It is usually 24-bit, 48, or 96 kilohertz. There is no Dolby digital compression like you get on a DVD, or even the slightly better compression on a Blu-ray. It is the raw studio master. When you hear a pin drop in a quiet scene, you are hearing the full dynamic range of that recording.
So when I am sitting there and the explosions are rattling my teeth, I am hearing the exact same ones and zeros that the sound designer heard in the studio. No shortcuts. No good enough for streaming algorithms.
No shortcuts at all. That is why the file sizes are so large. You are not just paying for the seat and the popcorn, you are paying for the bandwidth and the storage to move half a terabyte of data just for your entertainment. It is a massive logistical feat that happens thousands of times a day across the globe.
It puts the price of tickets into perspective. Slightly. I still think $15 for popcorn is a crime, but I will give them a pass on the data costs. So, looking ahead, CinemaCon 2026 is coming up in April. What is the big talk going to be? Are we finally going to see movies delivered entirely via the cloud without any middleman?
That is the big theme. Cloud-based e-delivery and AI-driven theater management are the top of the agenda. The goal is to remove as much human friction as possible. They want a world where a studio can finish a movie in Los Angeles, and within hours, it is automatically distributed, ingested, and scheduled for thousands of screens worldwide without a single person having to touch a hard drive or a satellite dish. They are even talking about direct-to-screen streaming for smaller theaters, though the security concerns there are still being debated.
It is the ultimate automation dream. A global cinema network that runs itself. Just hope no one forgets the password to the AI that runs the booth, or we are all going to be sitting in the dark waiting for a support ticket to be resolved. Sorry, folks. The movie is delayed because the projector is performing a mandatory system update.
That is the risk of the automated booth, but the efficiency gains are just too high for the major chains to ignore. When you are managing tens of thousands of screens, reducing the need for on-site technical staff is a massive bottom-line win. It also allows for more flexible programming. You could theoretically change your entire lineup for the afternoon in a matter of minutes if the data is already on the server.
I get it. It is just a bit of a bummer for the gearheads. But hey, at least we still have the tech to talk about. This stuff is fascinating, even if it is all hidden in a server rack now. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the movie theater is basically just a very specialized, very high-end data center that happens to sell soda.
That is a very accurate description. It is an edge computing node for high-fidelity media. The theater of the future isn't just a room with a screen, it's a high-performance playback environment that is constantly communicating with a global network.
An edge computing node. You really know how to take the romance out of a date night, Herman. Hey honey, let's go sit in an edge computing node and consume some wavelet compressed data.
But the data is so beautiful. Think of the color depth corn.
It is. I will give you that. Well, I think we have sufficiently cracked the container on DCPs. It is a world of keys, Linux drives, and massive satellite arrays. Thanks to Daniel for sending this over. It is a great reminder of the invisible infrastructure that makes our Friday nights possible.
It really is. And if you want to dive deeper into how this all connects to the broader cloud ecosystem, you should definitely check out episode 797, where we talked about who actually owns the cloud. It is a lot of the same players, and the consolidation we are seeing in cinema is just a microcosm of what is happening everywhere.
Good call. Well, that is our show for today. A huge thanks to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. We literally could not do this without them.
If you enjoyed this dive into the digital cinema booth, leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. It really does help people find us in the sea of content.
You can also find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We will catch you in the next one.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our